Hello, hello, hello. Glad to see everyone. Excited you're here for the April release of the Talent Market Index here at Talivity, powered by the excellent data over at Recruitix. My name is Jonathan Zila, but as you see, most people call me Jay-Z. Glad you're all here. We're letting folks stream into the room right now, and super excited to dive in. If you are as excited as me in this background that spring has sprung, just give me a quick happy spring in the chat so I can know you're with me. Give me a happy spring if you're with me. You may be battling some allergies, but get on your steady diet of Zyrtec and we can enjoy this season together. So happy spring, everybody. All right, well, let me tell you about Talivity. We are a tech-enabled consulting partner built for talent acquisition and HR leaders. We are helping our customers navigate this wild world that we live in, where AI touches so many parts of our lives, and ultimately helping us translate that into building stronger brands, understanding what's happening in the labor market, which is why you are all here today, and really helping our customers put AI to work in the ways it can really drive results. As you know, we are here today to get into the April release of the Talent Market Index. Some interesting data, as we'll always hear from Mona, what's really driving prices, and ultimately get some perspective and really grounded in data, grounded in truth. And we've got a special guest, which I'm going to save just to build the suspense here on an unexpected change on the itinerary, which we'll talk about later. But we've got some really good insights at the end to really start thinking how we put this data to use in each of our roles. So we're glad you're here as folks are joining the session. Happy spring to you, and happy release of the April Talent Market Index. So with that, I'm going to bring Mona to the stage. And Mona, as she always does, brings the heat, gets us ready, and will tell us what's happening in the data. Mona, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay-Z. Hey, everyone. Great to see you all again. We've got a really interesting Talent Market Index report for you all today, and an even more exciting guest at the end, which Jay-Z teased. So stick around to find out who it is. But before we get into all of that, let's just take a moment to set the table here. If you haven't been with us before, let me tell you what the Talent Market Index is. So we all wait for reports like the BLS Jobs Report, the ADP report, the JOLTS report. Every month we wait to see what happens in the labor market. And those reports track openings, hires, quits, but they don't answer one key question that we are answering here at Talivity. What does it actually cost to attract talent right now? So what we're doing is we're measuring what employers are spending on paid job advertising across 9 key segments. And that gives us a really good pulse and real-time view of where the hiring demand is, but also how that's impacting cost pressure. So when you layer that on top of the traditional data, you're getting a much fuller picture. It's helping you become a little bit more proactive in how you should think about investment in those areas, not just who's hiring, but obviously how hard and expensive it's going to be to compete for talent. So with all that being said, we have an interesting month. Let's just get straight to it. I'm going to call this a bit of a yo-yo dynamic. Last month, we had a bit of a somber jobs report. February surprised us all to the downside. And it was actually revised even further down to a loss of 133,000 jobs, which was the weakest report that we've seen in nearly a year and a half. Okay, here comes March, it's spring, the flowers are blooming, and guess what? The story flips. We saw 178,000 jobs added, which is actually the largest gain in 15 months. And, one of the strongest reports we've seen in a really long time. So are we back to rebound mode? I don't know. If you look a layer deeper, that growth wasn't necessarily broad-based. It was concentrated in a few areas, primarily healthcare. We saw construction and hospitality also up. But healthcare is kind of an important one to focus on because February was a decline in healthcare, which is the first time that's happened in a long time. We talk about this all the time. Healthcare has been holding up the labor market for a very long time. We saw that it was impacted by strike activity that temporarily pulled workers out of payroll. So what we're seeing here is a rebound from distortion. So it's not new momentum. There is always going to be demand in healthcare, and we're going to hear a little bit more about that later in the discussion. But at the same time, some of the underlying indicators are also softening. Unemployment dropped again this month, 4.4%. Last month, for perspective, is 4.3%. But this is partially also to do with a decline in labor force participation, which fell below 62%. This to me is a little bit of a red flag that we should pay attention to. So I'm going to take a beat to help you understand why this is important. A decline in labor force participation means there are fewer people actively in the labor market right now. So when participation drops, it means that people are leaving the workforce entirely. And that's one of the dynamics we're seeing right now with a lot of different variables at play here. But let's talk about discouraged workers, people who aren't actively looking for jobs anymore because they don't see viable activity or opportunities for them. So we're seeing that in a few different ways. Obviously, we're hearing the headlines of layoffs due to AI. We're hearing it's harder for people that are in entry-level positions to find jobs, longer search cycles, increasing skills mismatches. And the important nuance here is that when people stop looking, they're no longer counted as unemployed. So unemployment at 4.4%, it sounds relatively healthy on the surface, but the participation declining is actually a bigger concern. So we're seeing some signals here that workers are opting out and going to a different route. We're seeing SBA-backed business applications are elevated compared to pre-pandemic levels. So that suggests that people are exploring more self-employment opportunities instead of re-entering traditional workforces. Another thing to look at, wage growth. Wage growth is slowing. It's down to 3.5% year over year, which for perspective is the weakest pace we've seen. And another signal that competition for talent is easing in a lot of cases. So depending on where you look, you can tell two very different stories. The headline certainly suggests strength, and we were happy to see it this month, but the underlying data points to a smaller and less competitive labor market. So now let's transition to what the Talent Market Index says. And this is where the tension is continuing. Even with stabilization in demand, we're seeing prices elevated, like they just continue to persist and elevate month over month, year over year. 7 out of 9 categories are still above the baseline. So it's more expensive to attract talent when you're investing in attracting that talent today than it was during the peak demand of COVID in 2022. So hiring is maybe leveling out a little bit. The cost of attracting talent isn't coming down. And all this, of course, is happening against a backdrop of rising external risk. We've got geopolitical pressure. There might be potential energy shocks. That's adding another layer of uncertainty to how this all plays out. So with all that context said, I got a little more talking in on that slide than I normally do, but there's just a lot happening that I want to make sure you all are understanding. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I'm happy to get to them at the end of this presentation as well. Let's build on this and let's look at how this is actually showing up in the Talent Market Index April release. Here it is. Let's start with finance and operations. This one's going up month over month and still significantly elevated year over year, over 110%. This was a category that we saw job gains in pretty consistently over the past 90 days. This month was not the case. The BLS reported job losses in this category. But what is driving this pricing pressure up? We're seeing that the type of talent is more specialized. It's more senior. You have to pay a bit more to attract specialized talent in these industries. And we're seeing that in evidence of, kind of rising demand for manager or above level in finance and operation positions. All right, healthcare continues to hold up the labor market. And we're also seeing that prices are up 35% year over year. I'll call this flat month over month, slightly up. We can say this aligns with the rebound we saw in the BLS data. Although I don't know that those two things are related because of, a bit of a mismatch in how we were representing healthcare demand in the numbers due to the strikes and otherwise last month. All right, transportation and logistics down 37% month over month, but still up 130% year over year. They had a bit of a jump up last month, so good to see it start to level off and come down, but still looks like a bit of a short-term correction to me. All right, IT and related. This one is up just under 10% year over year, so relatively contained compared to other sectors. Sales stands out, up nearly 150% year over year. One of the strongest increases we're seeing, reinforcing that companies are still investing in roles that are tied to revenue and growth. Next up, retail, down 20% month over month, still up more than 160% year over year. And hospitality, we saw hospitality with some strong gains month over month in the BLS jobs report. We're seeing this essentially flat year over year, and one of the few areas where pricing pressure hasn't increased meaningfully over time. Light industrial continues to climb 130% year over year. This is one of the clearest examples of sustained demand and ongoing competition. This is in direct alignment with some of the gains that we saw in the BLS report as well. Food services up 45% year over year and continued growth month over month. Another category where demand has been steady and competition hasn't let up. But let's not forget, this is an industry that experiences a tremendous amount of turnover. So that's where we see prices elevate, especially in markets where the demand is high and the supply is low. Okay, so with that, I am very excited for the discussion portion of this conversation. I'm going to bring up Jay-Z back to the stage. He's going to moderate a conversation with Matt Grover. Matt Grover is our special guest today. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Recruitix. Matt has over 20 years experience in the talent acquisition industry. He oversees all of client management and at Recruitix. And that gives him a front row seat to all of the challenges and priorities shaping today's hiring landscape. Matt brings the voice of the customer. He's going to talk about what his clients are seeing, feeling, and navigating in real time. I am super excited for this conversation. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Jay-Z, I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, it's good to be with you all.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much. We're not going to make you put on your economist hat.
Good.
And make any bold predictions. We won't be starting any Kalshi or Polymarket lines today, but we would just really like to pull from some of the client experience that, I know how many client conversations you're involved with and how much, from a broad perspective, how much exposure you have to what clients are experiencing. Let's stay on this demand side of it for a minute, because I'd love to hear what clients are saying to you about, kind of their demand. And if it's, I don't know if it's one area or one job type or, or a role type, but just talk us through what you're hearing on the demand side from customers. What's the sentiment? What are they saying to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a demand perspective, there's call it 4 or 5 different verticals and categories where at least our customers are expressing an elevation in demand, where previous markets they might not have felt that way. So 1099 roles, really like that gig economy still has an elevated demand. Consumers are continuing to rely very heavily on those marketplaces and services, and so there's definitely an elevated demand there. Now there's seasonality that starts to push on that demand a little bit as we move throughout the spring and the summer. But what we've seen, at least for the first three, call it even almost 4 months of the year, is that that demand is higher than it's been in call it the last 6 months. Additionally, frontline workers, hourly roles continue to have an elevated demand. Even additional categories as construction, like Mona mentioned, has an elevated demand. And then, some specialized roles within the skill sector are quietly heating back up.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Healthcare
I
as well.
think, yeah, that and that's where I was going to go. I mean, it's like two different worlds. We and I'm not going to get too philosophical, but I think there is a world where folks are starting to create a new type of career, which involves a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I did hold back from singing that line, but
Thank you for that.
they're crafting this kind of 1099 life, which I think I think we're going to see more of that over time. But then we swing to healthcare, where I would prefer not to have maybe a 1099 nurse, helping me when I'm in for a big surgery, where we get into this real specialized, kind of field. What's happening in healthcare? I mean, is it just the more expensive? We just keep pushing. Is there any, as you just think about some of the client interactions and
Yeah.
what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the demand is still there, right? It's still as a category a lot more consistent than some of the other verticals that that we've been looking at, because demand in healthcare just continues to rise as majority of the population continues to age, right? So what we see there is still an intense competitive landscape for clinical positions, right? And that may be a bit of a Captain Obvious statement, but there really doesn't seem to be any change there, even in spite of some of the things we saw last month in the numbers. There's a lot of hospital systems that are competing against each other, as they always do, in a very localized way, given the nature and the behavior of candidates, particularly in the nursing sector, of wanting to make sure they can all find employment close to home. That's not changing. What they are finding, though, is that there is a bit of a degradation around quality in terms of the applications that they're getting into their systems. So they're having to pivot and do a few different things differently as they start to cast a bit more wide of a net. What we're seeing across the board as a little bit of a pivot in terms of just a strategy, there's a lot more channel volatility across executing from a recruitment marketing landscape. The traditional set it and forget it type of activities, it's just not the same anymore, as some of these channels are just behaving very differently in terms of the candidates that these marketplaces and other channels get into their ecosystem and how they behave. So the strategies across the board are having to shift a little bit as well.
That's great. And clearly why I imagine some customers really leaning in on, with your team, Matt, at Recruitix, on what do we do, differently? How do where should we be aggressive? I wonder if there's just, is there anything you're starting to see in client behavior as they're trying to respond to these? And what I mean is, I think these teams are being asked to continue to do more with less. I don't think that theme has changed. But are you seeing any creative, aggressiveness outside of obviously open up more channels, open up the aperture to find the talent? Are there differentiators? Are they bringing in hey, we found a way to kind of elevate our story? Are getting creative with technology? I mean, just, again, I know there's not a playbook here that says do 1, 2, and 3 and everything's going to be fine. But what are you hearing on how they're getting creative with more with less?
I mean, that sort of is the point. Is there isn't a consistent playbook these days that really works. There's I don't want to say a lot of trial and error, but there needs to be more of an appetite for customers to try different things. They have to be more fluid in their investment, right? Can't have a fixed strategy when things are changing beneath your feet as much. So the importance of measuring everything down funnel on a granular basis becomes even more important, so that you can really see where things are working and where you need to pivot. Because the historical channel that may have been working is going to shift. You need to be able to shift investment fast, and that's effectively what we're discussing with our customers. there's additional technology that they're leveraging to kind of find and hone in on quality as well. But the best thing that they can do is measure and shift budget as fast as they can, because the financial pressure still exists and will continue to do so for the rest of this year and the foreseeable future. And customers just need to continue to be mindful of that as they think about strategy and execution, and really driving hiring outcomes with that do more for less mentality that exists really across the board for every customer.
Yeah, it is an interesting time in that world. Yeah, I think it's a friend of mine once he said, try everything or try anything, measure everything, keep what works, right? It's like there is some of this that's foundational in the way you got to have some foundation, right? We can't build everything with Claude Cowork and then just go deploy it and hope for the best, right? As powerful as AI is becoming. But I think what we're seeing with our customers on this front is be very prescriptive with how you test technology and sort of, test new channels and, go after these new opportunities, so that, you can get to the outcome that you're aiming for, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of fluff that exists in, let's just talk about how incredible AI is and how hard it is sometimes to get the outputs you want out of AI. Like,
Sure.
that's all of our experiences, even though I'm leaning in heavily as we kind of steward our customers through this. You've got to suss out, like, what can I actually solve with, new technology, new channel, new source, new,
Yeah.
right? It gets back to some of that process work that you've got to do. What's the outcome we're aiming for, right?
Yeah. On the flip side, we talk about AI a lot and how candidates are leveraging AI to discover a lot more than they used to, particularly in say, healthcare, right? What that's creating is an environment where there's even fewer touch points between the employer brand itself and the candidate. That doesn't mean that application volume is decreasing, but the discoverability aspect for candidates is shifting and changing. And so the importance of being able to tell your story more effectively and precisely when you can interact with that candidate is even more important these days.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I had a meeting this week with a PhD student at Georgia Tech, which, as a Georgia fan, I had to look past that a little bit. But anyway, she just very matter of factly, when we started talking about candidate uses of AI tools, she said, "Oh yeah, she's she can't be more than 26, 25, 26."
Yeah.
She's like, all of my friends are using an AI application tool or some suite of tools to apply to jobs. She's like, that is just normal. And, I didn't want to like scream, get off my lawn at her, but I was like, I almost like couldn't believe what I was hearing, how matter of factly it was. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're starting to try that. She's like, we all have it going, right?
Yeah.
And then on what you and I see is we've got an event coming up here inside of our peer groups, around candidate fraud. And that maybe that's a pointed way to say it, but somebody who just signed up today said, I'm getting thousands of applications per role. Some of them don't even appear to be real. Some of them are so perfectly optimized to the job. It's like, how am I supposed to get through that?
Right? Like, yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of noise out there, and it's across the board, and at least in terms of the feedback that we're getting from our customers, it's not centered in any one particular industry. I will say it's more pervasive perhaps in certain industries than others, but the noise problem is real, and historical systems are not really built to filter out and identify that level of noise as agents that are acting on behalf of candidates can more fluidly and easily go through any apply process, no matter how many screener questions, no matter how long it may take a human to do. It can be done in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. Being able to identify those and use additional and new technologies is something that's becoming a lot more of interest these days than it ever has been. Is how do we meet the problem head on up front, filter out that noise, and keep more quality from an application perspective and candidate perspective before it makes its way into our systems. And so we're hearing an awful lot of discussion from our customers on that front as well.
Maybe let's grade a couple of industries here. If you can just think through, like, when when AI started to become part of every demo that you took, right? And it's in every sales pitch. That word started to slow down the sales process because people are going, wait a second, what does that mean? What's it going to do? Is that, I think I heard you say that some customers are starting to get a bit more, creative with, like, hey, let's get in deep. Let's try some things. Let's solve this. Um, is the AI fear is that starting to change in terms of, like, are customers more open to, these solutions from your perspective? And if so, or if not, can you just pick out a few industries where you're, again, client types or something where you're starting to see folks get more experimental and others sort of, batten down the hatches?
Yeah, I actually, so from a healthcare perspective, yes, I think there are a few other industries in the more higher scale place where they're seeing a lot more noise, where AI from a candidate standpoint is leveraged a little bit more. We have a consulting customer that's experiencing some of that as well. The appetite is very company driven, and the willingness to and ability to innovate is just it varies customer to customer. So everything is still evolving on this topic, right? There's a whole lot of unknowns, and some companies have just naturally adopted more of an appetite, and then others are just saying, I need to wait and see before we start to retool and holistically, change our entire tech stack to build for a future world where agents are going to be a much more pervasive part of the recruitment process. There are also a group of customers that are looking at their tech stack and saying, okay, there's some additional things we can layer on top to try and modernize this process without having to rip and replace everything. So, this answer is not meant to punt and say, well, it depends,
Sure.
But it is very much dependent on the internal policies, the AI appetite on each of customer bases.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think we're in a unique spot in our, the part of the, kind of the part of the business we impact, HR, talent acquisition, to encourage adoption in ways that can really drive the business forward. My biggest thesis, Grover, that I've told you over, cocktails at some point, is like, when we get HR and TA in the room at the table driving the business forward, more of a strategic operation, less of a general and administrative expense, the better it gets for that business, because we're ultimately driving the talent. And to me, I think that's what sets up the folks on this call in TA for success, is going, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, let's talk through how we can make a real strategic impact to, kind of move forward. And look, you don't have to bite off the whole thing. You don't have to do a full rip and replace on your tech stack. We actually, and one of our team members, Mark Tomasino here at Tellivity, he wrote a great article on just like, get really deep on the problem. And it can be one small problem, and then sort of follow that through. And that's really the mindset that we take, is let's lean in on where we can produce return. Let's go really deep on, how we can solve that one problem. And let's test and start to prove the concept. Because I think, the work we do for, all of us on this call, Matt, you in your seat, is driving these businesses forward with talent. Like, there's real opportunity for us to be the momentum that gets this train going.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think it's, well, any comments in the chat? Any questions on any of the data you heard from Mona? We've got her always ready in the waiting room here to dive into any of the particular areas. We're grateful that each of you are here today. Anything you'd like to hear from Matt or Mona or myself, we're here for it. But Matt, thank you for joining today. We're grateful to have the customer's perspective and really some of the incredible work you do, getting to share what how that's starting to play out in this new world. Grateful that you were here today. Thanks, Matt.
You're kind. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, well, everyone, that's a wrap for today's Talent Market Index. We'll keep it short this month. We're going to be back Thursday, May 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can snag your phone real quick and book a 30-minute complimentary strategy session right there with that QR code. Certainly can email myself, Mona, directly. We'd love to connect you with any specific experts, or simply give 30 minutes of our time to figure out how we can help you navigate this journey. Grateful you were here today, and we will see you next month, Thursday, May 14th at 1 p.m. for the next release of the Talent Market Index. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next month.